The streets of Carcer is being roamed by criminals committing crimes while filming them for a snuff production. The word Carcer comes from carcer, which means prison, and that makes sense because just like a prison, Carcer is also full of criminals breaking the law. But what makes Carcer worse is the absence of law, unlike most prisons. In this video of Manhunt Killers Disturbing Theories Iceberg, we will take a thorough and deep look at the real-life killers that might have influenced the world of Carcer, but also at the cut hunters from the game and how they probably still exist in the universe of the game in some shape and form. Along with that, we will take a look at some theories that people in my comments have suggested as well. The Cerberus appears throughout the entire game, helping to shape the snuff the way Starkweather directed. They constantly keep watch on Cash and controls him the entire game. Cerberus guards work for Starkweather and they act like a private protection, and that's why they are on his payroll. From the scene Follow the White Rabbit, they start to appear as enemies in the game hunting for Cash, because at that point in the game, Cash was supposed to be killed by the Smileys. However, Cash was a far better killer, which is why, even though he was overwhelmingly outnumbered, he managed to kill the Smileys and the Cerberus on his path and then get out of the penitentiary. When Cash gets to Starkweather's mansion, the Cerberus guards pray for him using shotguns with light attachment and rifles. Cash, on the other hand, kills all and enters Starkweather's mansion, where if he is caught early on by the Cerberus, they move the leader to a safer room. He's a very unique enemy. He has way more health than normal enemies, but he is also not exactly a boss because he has no health bar like them. There is a theory which suggests that he was going to kill Starkweather at some point in the game. It was going to happen after the ring got exposed, and then in order to keep him safe, he would get rid of Starkweather. Which means at some point in the development, the idea that Starkweather wouldn't die by the hands of Cash was probably considered. But I think it made a lot of sense why Cash gets to be the one who kills him. Scenario 2 would be that Starkweather was going to die by the hands of Cerberus leader, and in that way, Cash would make it out alive, but the leader would also be out there in the wild. And the final scenario that I can think of is that Cerberus leader would kill Starkweather, but Cash had to hunt him down as he was the last witness known to Cash who knew about the snuff ring, making him the final boss of the game. The first gang that ever appears in this game are the Hoods. They are the first hunter that Cash goes after because they are also the least dangerous ones. Starkweather even sets up one of them so that Cash has all the advantage over him. There is a theory that suggests that they don't know it's a snuff ring setup. They only think it's a blood sport, which is why they are here to hunt down Cash. They also are fans of the Maibatsu monstrosity car, which appears in the Grand Theft Auto franchise. It is implied that Starkweather purposely made the Hoods under-equipped and even under-prepared for the manhunt. To make matters worse for the Hoods, the director manipulated and exploited the circumstances, like filming at night, hiring hungover and sleepy Hoods to his hunt, to make the debut of Cash much easier. He has a poor opinion on all of the snuff film's hunters, including the Hoods, whom he calls a bunch of shitheads and low-life cowards while directing Cash. Not to mention, the Hoods also don't like Starkweather either. Whenever Cash is killing them or causing them real trouble, they actually tell Cash that this is just a sport and should not be taken that seriously, which is a way of begging mercy. These Hoods offer their services to anyone who needs their target hospitalized and perhaps even killed in a brutal gang beating. From old teachers that still annoy their client to pesky law-abiding cops, remnants of their rivalry with the INNOCENTZ can be found in the scene View of Innocent. At some point prior to 1992, the Hoods had some influence in San Andreas, particularly in the city of Las Venturas, as evidenced by wanted posters of Hoods, along with Cash, appearing in the Las Venturas Police Department. They do not physically appear in the game, suggesting that what little territory they once held was probably lost. Another theory suggests that some of these Hoods might be off-duty cops as well, which is very possible. Gary Schaffer is the head of the CCPD in Manhunt. He is theorized to be inspired from Milton Milan, a former mayor of Camden, New Jersey, who was convicted with 14 counts of corruption. Milton Milan, born in November 10, 1962, is an American Democratic politician. He was the first Latino mayor of Camden, New Jersey, elected in 1997, before being convicted of corruption and subsequently removed from office, becoming the third Camden mayor in 20 years to be found guilty of corruption. Milan grew up in North Camden and served as a United States Marine in the 1980s. He was elected to City Council in 1995. During his first term as mayor, he was indicted on a 19-count corruption case and convicted on 14 of these counts on December 21, 2000. The committed crimes are: laundered $65,000 in drug money, staged a break-in with his former business partner to collect insurance money illegally, accepted $30,000 to $50,000 in bribes from the mafia, used campaign money to pay for a vacation to Puerto Rico, received 2 vehicles and thousands of dollars in free work on his home from city contractors, and authorized the shakedown of a $5,000 political contribution from the city's public defender. The judge sentenced him to the maximum allowed under federal sentencing guidelines: 7 years and 3 months in prison minus time served, and 3 years of supervision, plus barred from running for office. He spared Milan a fine, citing the lack of ability to pay, but Milan was held responsible for $14,760 in restitution. During the scene Follow the White Rabbit, Cash is tasked to follow the man wearing the bunny outfit while the bunny keeps putting him in traps. Near the end of the scene, Cash manages to kill the White Rabbit and take the keys to get out of the penitentiary. The White Rabbit is obviously an actor working for Starkweather. There is a theory that he might be Piggsy's brother. Both Piggsy and the White Rabbit have a very similar form factor, and though we don't know how they look, they still appear very similar physically. Other than the fact that they have similar appearances, there is no evidence that supports or suggests them being brothers. Not to mention, knowing that your brother is treated so bad that he became a cannibal and still working for the same guy is unlikely. Also, White Rabbit appeared to be one of the few characters in Manhunt with some common sense and survival instincts, which is why I don't think they can be brothers at all. Before the events of Manhunt, the SKINZ had several gigs with Valiant Video Enterprises in the snuff films Hittin' the SKINZ, SKINZ Skills Tactics 101, and White Trash Bash. They seem to be a favorite among Valiant Video members because all of their films are rated 5 stars, including their recent film White Trash. Lionel Starkweather hates everything about the SKINZ with a passion, which he expresses in a rant in Fueled by Hate. Although he's pleased with just about anyone's death on tape, he feels a special satisfaction for the deaths of the SKINZ. Just like what he did to the previous Hood gang, the director made easier for Cash his survival in the Manhunt by comprising the positions of specific SKINZ for Cash to exploit. Starkweather also appears to be specifically unfazed by the SKINZ, as if Cash hides for too long in the shadows, he may make a condescending comment towards him. Named after their skinhead culture, the SKINZ are a Southern American hate group whose ideologies encompass a vast spectrum of white supremacist beliefs, which includes beliefs that are neo-Confederate, socially conservative, anti-immigrant, Aryanist, far-right, and Christian identitarian. One SKINZ member wears a shirt saying NPFO. It stands for Nazi Punks Fuck Off, and is probably a reference to the music album released in November 1981. Some have claimed the song was written as a reaction to far-right punk subcultures such as Nazi punk or the White Power skinhead movement, which is a form of neo-Nazism. There is a theory that despite Starkweather hating them, Starkweather shares some similar views and political agendas which aligns with theirs. Again, there are no evidence for it being true. He also calls them dumbass, which he wouldn't do if he shared the same ideologies.
These SKINZ are boring me, dumbass supremacist bastards, always blaming others for their inadequacies. Butcher them, Cash. Cut them up, beat them down, and choke the fucking life out of them.
Not much is known about the jury, but it is possible that they were once a precursor to the Hoods, considering the name of the level Born Again is listed as Jury Turf in the game files. In their concept art, they appear to carry baseball bats and hockey masks, a trait that would be passed on to the SKINZ. A member in the concept art that stands out wears a black jacket, grey undershirt, and black pants. One of them featured in the concept art looks a bit like a member of the SKINZ. Rockstar also did not mention much about this cut gang other than the fact that the masks were a cool concept. My theory is that they were not that unique compared to gangs like the Hoods, which is why they were ultimately cut from the game. Camheads are another cut enemy from the game. They have cameras for heads and wear blazer suits while carrying bats and nailed planks. It is unknown if the cameras were to be their actual heads or if it was some type of mask. Going along the lines of the cameras functioning as their real heads, it may give an idea for them being dropped from the final version of the game, as they would seen as either aliens, robots, or some type of supernatural or genetically enhanced being. This would more than likely break the player's suspense of disbelief, as Manhunt is a highly realistic video game due to it sharing its universe with the also realistic Grand Theft Auto franchise. There is a theory that they still exist, because when Cash is executing someone, where are the cameras coming from? Of course, it's the game's style of presenting a cutscene or the execution animation, but the theory suggests that they are the ones seeing the events of the game from far away, and that's why it's different and has way more angles every time. The Lost were a gang that was removed from Manhunt. They were composed of lunatics wearing makeshift armor led by a character known as Binbag. The Lost's armor provides excellent camouflage and protection, at the risk of being noticeably noisy or hard to move around in. Their weapons were most likely going to be pieces of junk such as hunks of rusty steel, broken pipes, glass shards, etc., all improvised into weapons, although one particular hunter described as a scrapyard samurai wields a katana. The SKINZ obtained some of their features in the final version of the game, like roaming the scrapyards and use of nail guns. They were said to have lived up to their name in Binbag's file, yet Binbag's early game model and the screenshots of the underlings suggests they were closer to being in the game than the Camheads, jury, or clowns before their model and files were lost. From pictures we can see that he is a very heavy man with rotting teeth wearing an outfit made out of garbage bags and barbed wire. Complete with an eye-obscuring mask, he would have carried 2 makeshift knives with rusty blades. According to part of his description, which describes him as emerging from the shadows roaring like a f***ing madman, he presumably would have been a downright animalistic person even by the standards of the other hunters. He was originally the leader of the Lost gang, indicating that he was meant to be a boss character like Piggsy or Ramirez, and presumably would have been fought at the end of the levels involving the Lost, with his weapon of choice being his 2 knives. Unlike the Scarecrow, he probably made it past the concept stage because he made it into an early model. Other than Binbag, the Lost has a look that doesn't go with the art style that Manhunt was trying to go for, which is probably why they got cut out of the game. They look more like enemies who belong in the Rupture from Bioshock 1 than Manhunt. James Earl Cash is awaiting his execution for 3 years in the Darkwoods Penitentiary. Though we all know that he's a skilled killer and has very good survival instinct, we still don't know why he was sent to prison in the first place. Due to the fact that he is a skilled killer and knows how to kill someone even with the most basic everyday objects, it's often theorized that he went to prison due to committing a murder. It is also very important to note that his death was broadcasted on the news. Usually when a criminal has committed very serious crimes and get caught because of that, their names become big enough and the news broadcasts their death. Because every single criminal ever is not mentioned in the news, which is why it led people to believe that he must have committed a massive killing spree. But what contradicts this is the fact that in the actual game, James actually shows emotion and acts reasonable towards saving his own family, keeping the tramp alive when Starkweather ordered him to, and also helping out the reporter. What's interesting though, however, is that these people give him self-interest. He saves his family because they are tied to him. He saves the tramp because Starkweather needed it to happen. He also helped the reporter because her goals and his personal interests aligned.
Get in, you idiot! Get in! you? I seen your face before.
Get off of me! I'm a reporter! I was at your execution!
Keep talking.
I've been following Starkweather's operation for months.
Who's Starkweather?
The guy that's been talking you through this whole circus of death? Look, I've got all I need to expose that sick bastard, but he's definitely on to me now. So I have to get back to my apartment, collect my material, and get out of town before I become another one of Starkweather's extras.
You can bring him down? This Starkweather?
Absolutely. This is gonna make my career.
Okay, let's go.
Huh?
To your apartment. Drive!
Other than that, everyone that has ever come across in the entire game always wanted to kill him, which is why, because of survival, he had no other option but to kill those hunters, which makes it very difficult to judge his character, but also makes it quite unlikely that he went to jail because of a mass murder spree and got the death sentence, which is why players think the reason Cash probably went to jail for is simply because of the fact that he might have killed a cop and was sentenced to death. This is possible because he kills cops in the game. It is possible that he might have killed a corrupt cop and went to prison because of that, but there are no way for the government officials to prove or show that the cop was corrupt, which would also make sense that a cop killer went to prison and later on became a big national headline.
It looks like this goes all the way to the top. I can't trust anyone, least of all the police, and time's running out. I've got to get the one piece of evidence that will expose Starkweather without a shadow of a doubt. Footage and testimony of a man who was executed by the state 5 hours ago.
James Earl Cash, found guilty and sentenced to death, has been on death row for the past 3 years and was executed last night.
Hey, tough guy, wake up. You're not dead. Well, not yet, anyway. You're getting a second chance. Another throw of the dice. As far as the world is concerned, you died back in the chamber. Justice was served. James Earl Cash is rotting in... Hey, get a grip and calm down. You're probably suffering from shock, and I'm here to help. Pick up the ears. Put it on. Go on. That's better. Now only you can hear me. And that's the way you're gonna want it, because I'm your only way out of here. Hey, easy. Look, you've had an unexpected reprieve. Do exactly as I say, and I promise this will be over before the night is out.
According to Valiant Video's winter and spring catalog, the WARDOGS are known to stalk their prey in organized packs. One camouflaged WARDOG lies in wait, armed with a tranq rifle, looking for any signs of their runner. When the runner crosses his sights, he hits them with a well-placed shot that incapacitates them with its dosage of an immobilizing drug. Debilitated, the runner attempts to flee, but several other WARDOGs who were also anticipating their prey pounce from their hiding spots and surround this sap for a grisly death before skinning them for meat to be smoked and salted by Grandma. The catalog also shows one of them providing bodyguard services. Valiant Video's winter/spring catalog also describes the way the WARDOGs treat their runners, which implies that they might be cannibal poachers as part of the gang's survivalist lifestyle. This might explain the headless bodies hung in one of the rooms of the WARDOGs' apartment base. The WARDOGs are also composed of sadistic Southerners and African Americans who are poachers and wannabe soldiers with alleged military careers. Their Vietnam War and Army motive combined with their Southerner identity means they hate communists, non-soldiers, including civilians and draft dodgers, and low-rank soldiers, besides the typical weaklings and cowards typically hated by most hunters. Even if they aren't any of these sorts of people, the gang still use these as insults to anyone they hate. Though not confirmed, it is theorized that some of these WARDOGs were never soldiers or part of any wars at all. Instead, they turned to soldiers, or more likely, hunters by Ramirez the leader, in order to work efficiently in Starkweather's films. The CCPD, or Carcer City Police Department, is the state's law enforcement agency. Judging by the chevron insignias on the sleeves of their shirts, known ranks in the CCPD include private, corporal, and sergeant. The highest known rank is police chief, which is currently held by Gary Schaffer. There are also detectives or investigators within the CCPD. The CCPD also has its own SWAT unit. However, they rely on regular cops as snipers for some reason, but early versions of Trained to Kill correctly used SWAT as snipers. According to one of the cops, there are liberal cops among their ranks, possibly cops who are opposed to the cruel cops. One of these cruel cops mentions another cop who is named Mike, who's also with him in the manhunt for cash, but it is unknown who among the four known cop is Mike. Police officers may be awarded with medals or an Officer of the Year title by doing impressive feats of bravery in the line of duty. The names of CCPD officers who have died in service are inscribed on a wall located within the CCPD's headquarters. They protect the criminals of Carcer because those criminals are valuable to Starkweather's operation, and as long as they roam the street, they can be used on the films of Starkweather. And with the CCPD comes the SWAT. When the CCPD's regular officers are faced with a dangerous crisis whose de-escalation is beyond their capabilities, they dispatch their very own Special Weapons and Tactics Team, or SWAT for short. Trained in various specialized tactics beyond regular police training, they possess the capabilities to handle a wide variety of hostile situations that may disrupt peace in society or descend order into chaos. Their military-grade equipment means that SWAT can tackle threats with excessive force, although the corruption of the CCPD means the Carcer SWAT may abuse this power maliciously and liberally, especially against mentally ill criminals. The SWAT has three notable hunters: Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Alpha is a SWAT officer who professes to be trained in negotiation, something he hardly uses on who he thinks is just an insane vagrant who went postal. He is pretty much an average Joe with a family and a normal life outside of the line of work, but he can be disrespectful and cruel against insane criminals since he mostly plans to kill Cash rather than arrest him, something unfitting but expected for someone in his profession as an officer of the anti-crazy and anti-hobo CCPD. Bravo is an old SWAT team leader who's close to retirement and has worked many overtime shifts that have forced him to spend too much time on stimulants, implying his dedication to the police force. Among the three SWAT officers, he's the most professional in his line of work since he uses his powers to de-escalate violence without force when he can. Being discriminate with his targets and observant with the situation at hand, etc. is still, he may be boorish and cruel with mentally ill criminals. Charlie is a SWAT team leader who sees his dangerous line of work as an opportunity to exercise the greatest thrills. No different from the uncivilized thugs that Cash meets before this cop, the manhunt for Cash is nothing but a sport to him as he derives excitement from chasing down criminals before chasing in on them to experience the ultimate thrill that is shooting the unfortunate perp down. Among the three SWAT officers, he treats the manhunt with the most levity. Starkweather is the snuff film director of Carcer City. Though it has never been confirmed, it has been highly speculated and theorized that Starkweather was probably inspired by Charles Starkweather. Who is Charles Starkweather? Starkweather was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, the fourth of 7 children of Guy and Helen Arnold Starkweather. As he grew older and stronger, the only subject in which Starkweather excelled was physical education, where he found an outlet for his rage against those who bullied him. Starkweather then began to bully those who had once picked on him. Eventually, he felt rage against anyone he disliked. In 1956, at 18, Starkweather was introduced to 13-year-old Carol Ann Fugate. He began to visit her every day after school. Starkweather taught Fugate how to drive, and one day he crashed a car belonging to Starkweather's father, who banished Starkweather from the family home. And this brings us to the first murder. Late on November 30, 1957, Starkweather became angry at Robert Colvert, a service station attendant in Lincoln, for refusing to sell him a stuffed animal on credit. He returned several times during the night to purchase the small item until finally, brandishing a shotgun, he forced Colvert to give him $100 from the till. He then abducted and drove Colvert to a remote area where they struggled over the gun, injuring Colvert before Starkweather killed him with several shots to the head. On January 21st, 1958, Starkweather went to Fugate's home. Fugate's mother and stepfather, Velda and Marion Bartlett told them to stay away. He fatally shot them, then clubbed to death their 2-year-old daughter, Betty Jean. He hid the bodies in an outhouse and chicken coop behind the house. Starkweather and Fugate drove to the farmhouse of 70-year-old August Mayer, one of his family's friend who lived in Bennett, Nebraska. Starkweather killed him with a shotgun blast to the head. He also killed Mayer's dog. Fleeing the area, the pair drove their car into mud and abandoned it. When Robert Jensen and Carol King, 2 local teenagers, stopped to give them a ride, Starkweather forced them to drive back to an abandoned storm cellar in Bennett. He shot Jensen in the back of the head. He attempted to rape King, but King put up too much of a resistance for him to do so. He became angry with her and fatally shot her as well. Starkweather and Fugate drove to a wealthy section of Lincoln, where they entered the home of industrialist Chester Loire Ward and his wife Clara. Starkweather stabbed their maid to death, then waited for Loire and Clara to return home. Starkweather killed the family dog by breaking its neck to keep it from alerting the wards. Clara arrived first alone and was also stabbed to death. When Loire Ward returned home that evening, Starkweather shot and killed him as well. Starkweather and Fugate filled Ward's black 1956 Packard with stolen jewelry from the house and fled Nebraska. Needing a new car because of Ward's Packard having been identified, the couple came upon traveling salesman Merle Collison sleeping in his Buick along the highway outside Douglas, Wyoming. After Collision was awakened, he was fatally shot. The salesman's car had a parking brake, which was something new to Starkweather. While he attempted to drive away, the car stalled because the brake had not been released. He tried to restart the engine and a passing motorist geologist, Joe Sprinkle, stopped to help. Starkweather threatened him with the rifle and an altercation ensued. At that moment, Natrona County Sheriff's Deputy William Romer arrived on the scene. Fugate ran to him yelling something to the effect of, "It's Starkweather, he's going to kill me." Starkweather drove off and was involved in a car chase with 3 officers, exceeding speeds of 100 miles per hour. A bullet fired by Heflin shattered the windshield and the flying glass cut Starkweather deep enough to cause bleeding. On May 23, 1958, he was sentenced to death, and Starkweather was executed in the electric chair at the Nebraska State Penitentiary in Lincoln, Nebraska on June 25, 1959. Fugate was convicted as an accomplice and received a life sentence on November 21, 1958. He was paroled in June 1976 after serving 17.5 years at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women in York, Nebraska. No wonder people think Lionel Starkweather was inspired from this guy. Smileys used to be the insane inmates of the Darkwoods Penitentiary until they took it for themselves and killed all guards. Now they rule the penitentiary, and when Cash goes there to chase the White Rabbit, they all go after Cash by trapping him.
No, not fuck.
During the development stage, the Smileys used to have a leader before the idea was scrapped. His name was Kenneth Jesperson, the former headhunter of the Smileys, who was stripped of his mask and rank by his own gang for being responsible for an incident known only as the Piggsy debacle that could be related to the barring of his Smileys gang from the hunt for their gross disobedience. This backstory, along with almost everyone and everything tied to it, was scrapped from the final product. Along with the INNOCENTZ gang, the Smileys are a recent casting done by snuff film director Lionel Starkweather for his latest productions. They have never participated in any of Starkweather's or Valiant Video's previous productions before their debut in the 4-star rated snuff film Mouth of Madness. Like the rest of the gangs in his snuff film, Starkweather bailed the Smileys out so that they can take over the asylum as hunting grounds where Cash can murder them for the director. The release of the Smileys may also be connected to the closing of their prison, possibly done to shut both the Smileys and Cash inside while keeping the snuff film shooting secret. Just like what he did to the other guys, the director comprised the positions and plans of the Smileys for Cash to exploit. They are the only group of hunters who actually impress Starkweather, but they're still below him as he sentences them all to die by his script. Although long scrapped, the Smileys had a fierce rivalry with the clowns. It is theorized that the Smileys were considered the superior group over the clowns. Like the Smileys, they were supposed to be the final in-hunt gang because of them being the most high-ranked pack in the hunt and the exclusion of the Smileys from the hunt. Throughout the entire game, there are a bunch of dead Cerberus that appears in the game. But why? We know they are working for Starkweather, so why are they dead? They also died in the most gruesome way possible. There are a couple of theories behind it. The first theory suggests that they didn't die in a gruesome way, rather they died and snuff was shot on their dead bodies, which left the bodies at that state. And the reason they died probably had to do with occupational hazard. A second theory suggests that some Cerberus might have gone rogue on Starkweather's orders, which gave him no choice but to kill them. The last theory, which in my opinion is the most believable one out of all, is that theory 1 and 2 might have happened besides this one, and it's about Piggsy being the chainsaw-wielding maniac he is, going after these Cerberus, and while trying to control the situation, they died. It makes a lot of sense since Piggsy eats human flesh, so he might have been praying for these Cerberus for food, and some of these dead Cerberus guards have a decapitated head, which means the head was chainsawed by Piggsy. It is theorized that Piggsy might be inspired from Ed Gein. Edward Theodore Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield or the Plainfield Ghoul, was an American murderer, suspected serial killer, and body snatcher. On the morning of November 16, 1957, 58-year-old Plainfield hardware store owner Bernice Warden disappeared. Warden's son, Deputy Sheriff Frank Warden, entered the store around 5 p.m. to find the cash register open and blood stains on the floor. Frank Warden told investigators that on the evening before his mother's disappearance, Gein had been in the store and was expected to return the next morning for a gallon of antifreeze. A sales slip for the antifreeze was the last receipt written by Warden on the morning that she disappeared. That evening, Gein was arrested at a West Plainfield grocery store, and the sheriff's department searched the Gein farm. A sheriff's deputy discovered Warden's decapitated body in a shed on Gein's property, hung upside down by her legs with a crossbar at her ankles and ropes at her wrists. The torso was dressed out like a deer. She had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle, and the mutilations were made after her death. Searching the house, authorities found whole human bones and fragments, a waste basket made of human skin covering several chairs, skulls on his bedposts, female skulls, some with the tops sawn off, bowels made from human skulls, a corset made from a female torso skinned from shoulders to waist, leggings made from human leg skin, masks made from the skin of female heads, Mary Hogan's face mask in a paper bag, Mary Hogan's skull in a box, Bernice Warden's entire head in a burlap sack and his heart in a plastic bag, 9 vulvas in a shoebox, and many more. Even though there are no definitive evidence that he is a cannibal, it is highly theorized he probably was. His crimes later inspired the film The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Piggsy is probably inspired from the movie.
No more! Pigsy's angry! Pigsy's gonna suck your guts!
The clowns were originally the last group of hunters found in the game. They're described as hunters who can be worse than hunting allos, implying when they kill and hunt, the reason for hunting is simply for fun. They have deadly bodily skills, no other talents other than being excellent hunters. They are described to have used accelerant drugs when hunting, such as amphetamines, along with holding a fierce rivalry with the Smileys. Their sponsor was a man named James W. Gacy, who owned the Carcer City Art Gallery and Museum. The third variant of the clown's face in the first row resembles that of serial killer John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was an American serial killer and sex offender who raped, tortured, and murdered at least 33 young men and boys in Norwood Park Township, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. In Norwood Park Township, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, he became known as the Killer Clown due to his public performances as a clown prior to the discovery of his crimes. Gacy murdered at least 33 young men and boys, 26 of whom he buried in the crawl space of his house. His victims included people he knew and random individuals lured from Chicago's Greyhound bus station, Bughouse Square, or off the streets with the promise of a job with PDM, an offer of drink or drugs or money for sex. Gacy usually lured a lone victim to his house, although on more than one occasion, Gacy had what he called doubles, 2 killed in the same evening. Gacy was brought to trial on February 6, 1980, charged with 33 murders. He was executed on May 10, 1994. Active since the year 1998, the INNOCENTZ are a notoriously dangerous and ruthless gang based around the East Los Albos area in Carcer City, where they hang out in the abandoned church and a vacated mall. Their tags found on the walls of the WARDOGS apartment imply that it used to be their territory. A unique gang, the INNOCENTZ are a mixed bag composed of 2 subgroups and hence the most diverse gang in Carcer City so far. The first subgroup is the Scullies, who are distinguished by their prominent skull imagery. Mexicans are prevalent in this group, but there are other ethnicities as well, as shown by one particular American member. They range from mere lowlifes, junkies, and drug dealers to real devil-worshipping occultists. The second subgroup is the babyfaces, obese men who are unhinged pedophiles or mentally disabled serial killers that even the Scullies find appalling, although they never say it to their face.
Come on, you know Daddy would never hurt the apple of his eye. Why won't my baby boy come to me? I've got a surprise for you. Look, I've got it right here.
Ramirez is theorized to be inspired from Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez was an American serial killer and sex offender whose killing spree occurred in greater Los Angeles and the San Francisco Bay Area in the state of California. Ramirez's crimes were heavily influenced by a troubled childhood. Frequently abused by his father, he developed brain damage and started abusing drugs at the age of 10. On April 10, 1984, Ramirez murdered May Leung in the basement of her apartment building in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. Leung was with her 8-year-old brother and looking for a lost $1 bill when Ramirez approached the girl and told her to follow him into the basement to find it. Once they were in the basement, Ramirez beat, strangled, and raped Leung before stabbing her to death with a switchblade, hanging her partially nude body from a pipe by her blouse. 2 months after the murder of Leung, Ramirez initiated a series of violent home invasions that sparked a moral panic in Los Angeles and later San Francisco. He began with a long June 1984 attack before reemerging in March 1985 and continuing his spree throughout the summer, leading to one of the largest police manhunts in California history. On June 28, 1984, 79-year-old Jeannie Vincow was found murdered in her apartment in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. She had been stabbed repeatedly in the head, neck, and chest while asleep in her bed, and her throat slashed so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. 9 months later, on On March 17, 1984, Ramirez attacked 22-year-old Maria Hernandez outside her house in Rosemead, shooting her in the face with a .22 caliber handgun after she pulled into her garage. She survived when the bullet ricocheted off the keys she held in her hands as she lifted them to protect herself. Hernandez played dead until Ramirez left the scene. Inside the house, her roommate, a 34-year-old Dale Yoshi Okazaki, heard the gunshot and ducked behind a counter when she saw Ramirez enter the kitchen. When she raised her head to get a look at what had happened, Ramirez, who was waiting for Okazaki to peek over the counter, shot her once in the forehead, killing her instantly. Within an hour of the Rosemead attack, Ramirez pulled 30-year-old Tsai Lian Veronica Yu out of her car in Monterey Park, shot twice with a .22 caliber handgun and fled. 1 week later, at approximately 2 a.m. on March 27, 1984, Ramirez entered a home that he had burglarized a year earlier just outside of Whittier and killed 64-year-old Vincent Charles Zazzara in his sleep with a gunshot to his head. Zazzara's wife, 44-year-old Maxine Lavinia Zazzara, was awakened by the gunshot. Ramirez beat her and bound her hands while demanding to know where her valuables were. While he ransacked the room, Maxine escaped her bonds and retrieved a shotgun from under the bed, which she was unaware was not loaded. She pulled the trigger just after he turned around and saw her. The infuriated Ramirez shot 3 times with his handgun, killing her, then fetched a large carving knife from the kitchen. He mutilated her body by cutting an inverted cross into her chest, then removed her eyes and placing them in a jewelry box. He attempted to have sex with her body, but found himself so shaken by her attempting to shoot him that he was unable to achieve an erection. On May 14, 1985, Ramirez returned to Monterey Park and entered the home of 66-year-old Bill Doi and his disabled wife, 56-year-old Lillian Doi. Surprising Doi in his bedroom, Ramirez shot him in the face with a .22 semi-automatic pistol as Doi went for his own handgun. After beating Bill unconscious, Ramirez entered Lillian's bedroom, bound her with handcuffs, then raped her after he had ransacked the home for valuables. Bill died of his injuries while in the hospital. If I continue to talk about his crimes in this video, it would be 3 hours long. Ramirez died of blood cancer at Marine General Hospital in Green Bay, California on June 7, 2013, missing out on Grand Theft Auto 5. Gary Schaffer is the head of the CCPD. He's on the payroll of Starkweather. There is a cutscene in the game where it's revealed that Starkweather orders him to keep Cash alive and keep the snuff ring out from exposing. Other than that one scene, we never get to hear him ever again, and he is never shown either, though he did plead not guilty in his trial. He was inspired by Gerard John Schaffer. Born in March 26, 1946, he was a murderer and suspected serial killer, known as the Killer Cop, the Hangman, and the Butcher of Blind Creek, who was convicted of the 1972 murder and mutilation of 2 teenage girls in Port St. Lucie, Florida. He is suspected of up to 26 other murders. I have talked about him thoroughly on my previous video, described by prosecutor Robert Stone as the most sexually deviant person he has ever encountered. Schaffer was sentenced to 2 terms of life imprisonment at his 1973 trial, to be served at Florida State Prison. He was stabbed 40 times to death by a fellow inmate, Vincent Faustino Rivera, while incarcerated at his facility in December 1995. Starkweather's second inspiration is theorized to be Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1994, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster, was an American serial killer and sex offender who killed and dismembered 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. Many of his later murders involved necrophilia, cannibalism, and the permanent preservation of body parts, typically all or part of the skeleton. Dahmer committed his first murder in 1978, 3 weeks after his graduation. Dahmer picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Mark Hicks, who was 18 years old. Dahmer bludgeoned Hicks with a 10-pound dumbbell. When Hicks fell unconscious, Dahmer strangled him to death with the bar of the dumbbell, then stripped the clothes from Hicks' body before exploring his chest with his hand, then masturbating as he stood above the corpse. Hours later, Dahmer dragged the body to the basement. The following day, Dahmer dissected Hicks' body in the basement. He later buried the remains in a shallow grave in his backyard. Several weeks later, he unearthed the remains and pared the flesh from the bones. He dissolved the flesh in acid before flushing the solution down the toilet. He crushed the bones with a sledgehammer and scattered them in the woodland behind behind the family home. He threw Hicks's necklace and the knife used to dismember him from the West Bath Road Bridge into the Cuyahoga River. On November 20, 1987, Dahmer, at the time still residing with his grandmother, encountered a 25-year-old man from Ontonagon, Michigan named Stephen Tuomi at a bar and persuaded him to return to the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee, where Dahmer had rented a room for the evening. According to Dahmer, he had no intention of killing Tuomi, but intended to simply drug him and lie beside him as he explored his body. Dahmer purchased a large suitcase in which he transported Tuomi's body to his grandmother's residence. 1 week later, he severed the head, arms, and legs, then filleted the bones from the body before cutting the flesh into pieces small enough to handle. Dahmer placed the flesh inside the plastic garbage bags. He wrapped the bones inside a sheet and pounded them into splinters with a sledgehammer. The dismemberment process took Dahmer approximately 2 hours. He disposed of all of Tuomi's remains, excluding the head, in the trash. According to Dahmer, Tuomi's murder was a pivotal incident after which he did not try to control his compulsions. He began to actively seek victims, most of whom he encountered in or around gay bars, and would typically lure them to his grandmother's home. He would drug his victim before or shortly after engaging in sexual activity with them. Once his victim was unconscious, he strangled them to death. 2 months after the Tuomi killing, Dahmer encountered Native American prostitute Gein Dockstader. Dahmer lured him to his grandmother's residence with an offer of $50 to pose for nude pictures. They engaged in sexual activity before Dahmer drugged Dockstader and strangled him on the floor of the cellar. On March 24, 1988, Dahmer met a 22-year-old bisexual man, Richard Guerrero, outside a gay bar called The Phoenix. Dahmer lured Guerrero to his grandmother's residence, offering him $50 to spend the night with him. He drugged Guerrero with sleeping pills, strangled him with a leather strap, and performed oral on the corpse. In September 1988, Dahmer's grandmother asked him to move out, largely because of his drinking, his habit of bringing young men to her house late at night, and the foul smells emanating from the basement and the garage. Dahmer found a one-bedroom apartment at 808 North 24th Street and moved into the residence on September 25th. 2 days later, he was arrested for drugging and fondling a 13-year-old boy whom he lured to his home on the pretext of posing nude for photographs. On January 30, 1989, Dahmer pleaded guilty to the charges of second-degree sexual assault and of enticing a child for immoral purposes. Sentencing was suspended until May. On May 23, 1989, Dahmer was sentenced to 5 years probation and 1 year in the House of Correction, with work release permitted so he could keep his job. He was also required to register as a sex offender. Dahmer was found to be legally sane at his trial. He was sentenced to 15 terms of life imprisonment on February 17, 1992. Dahmer was later sentenced to a 16th term of life imprisonment for an additional homicide committed in Ohio in 1978. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by Christopher Schaffer, a fellow inmate. In the game, Starkweather is actually very similar to him. Starkweather gets sexually aroused himself when he sees Cash kill his enemies in brutal ways, sometimes even whispering to him how he is masturbating and enjoying himself, and how Cash inspires him, which is why I think the theory that he is probably inspired by Jeffrey Dahmer has a lot of ground. And with that, this iceberg comes to an end. I have delved deep into the criminals and killers this time due to a lot of requests from the viewers, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please become a member of my channel if you want to watch more iceberg videos and get early access to my videos. Thanks to DewSmoke TV for being a loyal member of this channel and helping me out in these videos. Perfect Enrager signing out.